So, you know what I do now, Betty?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Welcome to Words Carry Us, an ongoing series of live stream events featuring readings and interviews from Greenkill in Kingston, New York. I'm Betty MacDonald, writer, storyteller, and host of Words Carry Us. Tonight, we're doing things a little different from our usual format, and we're extending a warm welcome to two educators and writers who go way back. Steve Clorfeine is the author of 6 collections of poetry and a nonfiction book, Journals of an American Buddhist in Nepal. He leads physical theater and meditation workshops in the US and in Europe, as well as an ongoing writing workshop now in its 20th year. David Appelbaum is a professor emeritus of philosophy of the State University of New York, New Paltz. He's the author of many books, including Everyday Spirits, and most recently, Portuguese Sailor Boy and collector of lapsed time. He's co-founder of Cod Hill Press. Please welcome two of my heroes, let me start all over. Please welcome two of my heroes, two really old friends, Steve Clorfeine and David Appelbaum.
Thank you, Betty. David and I met in 1971. We were both beginning to teach at the State University at New Paltz. We were introduced by what I think was a mutual friend. We were both part of the Gurdjieff Foundation at that time. David has made his way for decades, longer than I, in that context. We also wrote a lot together, and with several other people as well. And that was still in early days. And since those early days, we established a postcard exchange, which lasts to this very day and has collections of postcards from really all over the world, back and forth. And we used to do some readings that included those postcards, which we talk about from time to time, trying to find a venue that might work to do that again. In any case, this conversation, interview, reading really focuses on David's 4 most recent poetry collections. And this is the premier one for tonight, but we're going to refer to the other ones as well. Collector of Lapsed Times. And I wanted to begin by asking David about the title itself, because it's a very kind of packed, potent title when you think about the words collector and lapsed and times. It covers a lot of territory. So maybe you could start off that way, David.
Time is something that's always fascinated me in many different ways. The idea of time, but especially this matter of living one's time, as though each human being comes to the planet with a certain time to be consumed, to be lived, hopefully to be digested and used in the growth of whatever it is to be human. The lapse of the time that is mine, of course, is the passing. It could be a terminus, it could be a transformation. And this little book of poems, prose poems, words put together to express the feel of passing. You could say it's a collection of elegies. An elegy is a bit of poetry written especially for the passing of a time. The collector is himself, herself, a person interested in archives, interested in memory, interested in remembering. And so it's a collection of times that somehow stand out from the time of every day. A second time, another time that each of us, in some inexplainable, miraculous way, touches in a life and is memorialized by it. The book also is quite timely in that, for me, it gave me a chance to look back, to recollect, to see what happened in time past from a new point of view. Which brings the realization that time past is not the same as time dead or time gone. The past and somehow continues to exert this influence on me as I write. And I have the thought that the past can also be affected by how I think and how I write about it.
You mentioned in the, you write at the beginning of the collection, you draw from the Latin to different, maybe complementary meanings. One is to gather together, and the other is to read with another. And I kind of wonder what you might say about to read with another, particularly.
The reading of the past in some kind of communal way creates a very powerful force that is able to actually change what took place, change the way it influences how one thinks and feels in present time, and so can actually make history into a different thing. To read together what took place opens an avenue of hope. To leave the past as dead, as unreadable, is to close the door. So these poems mark a crossing of one realm to another. Many of the characters in here bring back thoughts to me of people close who didn't survive the last anti-war movement. So in a way, the book is very timely as we face in current events what took place for me and for Steve in the late 60s and early 70s.
A lot of the poems in this collection refer to travel and also to a certain time in human history, and there are many references to ancient places. And not to, ask for too much at the same time, but you've got love affairs and relationships woven into that as you move from place to place in various poems. It might be a good time to pick one and read.
Let's begin with this one, which has to do with the transition. I call it the crossing. At the dock, the boat keeper holds a bag of coins. It is made of ostrich hide, a gift from his grandmother. He wears a coat of glass. The coins are saved for the dead, as well as the catatonic, the drowsy, the sleeping, the numb. As he read in Homer, all must pay for the passage. The coins come from worlds apart, Etruscan, Hittite, Sumerian, Babylonian. Some are round as a vowel, some are notched for measure. Some have a hole like an aspirant. Most are stamped with holy signs. Transport is difficult. The boat keeper must jiggle the coins to keep on course, as the deck is piled with tea and textiles. Ghosts of sailors vie for them, threatening to run the boat aground. Even the deaf understand the music. Even the bathers still on shore. It is possible to travel great distances and hear the wind's warning, not knowing from where it comes. The dead are seated on styrofoam benches, all face seaward. Behind, smoke rises from barrel stoves. Women with wooden spoons stir pots. They know the last glimpse is unbounded. Children play with the fairy's cat while they sit on the bottom of a well, empty except for pure light, and listen to faint chimes. The dry dock is arranged like a graveyard. The many gangplanks lead to a stone stairway, but are at different distances from the town. On the bay, many boats ply the waves, but all except the boat keepers stay in sight of land. They fish, explore, take pleasure behind curtained ports, and return before sundown. From the blue sea, where dreaming begins, wind in the keeper's coat of a sail, the boat presses on. Eventually, you will be known. We will all be known, the keeper says, as he pours a libation from a goatskin jug. Bhikkhus wave a censer, chanting words of reveille, which rise with smoke, two thin streams ascending, unbroken to the angelic sky. Others pray, eyes forward, since it is easy to miss the country of their destination. It rises and sinks like flames on damp wood, like a voice hoarse from calling.
There's very strong imagery here, and I'm curious what you would say about visualizing imagery and its connection to getting words down on paper.
To me, there's a trace that awakens some part of my feeling, perhaps some hidden part of my mind, that in opening seems to have a new sensitivity to what is to be said, to the outpouring of words. Maybe it's a little different from the kind of circling thoughts that go from one association to another. This is more like listening to a voice or a voicing that demands a certain attention, but is quite strange to my ear. It isn't exactly me talking. And for that reason, I tend to regard these different projects, different collections, you might say, as experiments with different voices that seem to have a life of their own within my psyche or wherever.
You said that these four most recent collections were all related, and I wanted to ask you, how does a collection begin for you? How does it get underway? Is it a theme? Is it a place? Is it a time? Or what combination of those is it that gets things going? And if you would like to say also, how does it progress? How does it move on? How does it collect itself?
It's as though there is an impulse at the beginning that is very undefined and yet has a certain energy to it that begins to turn this inner ear in a certain direction. I should say for me at the start that poetry is a practice. I give it a certain space, a certain time, maybe even on a daily basis or as close to that as possible. And it's within this space that something, this following of a trace begins to articulate itself. There's a lot of jotting and a lot of collecting in that way, as if I'm building up an archive of a certain sort. But I also want to say that each of these collections is a different voice. It isn't, I would say, it isn't me who is the one in back of the first person pronoun in the different collections, but a being, an entity that may be close to me or maybe not so close to me, that continues to remain a stranger to me. Familiar, but still I'm not quite certain of my relation to that one who is speaking in the poem. So that this collection, the Lapse Time collection, came to me when I began to feel a certain need to make, let's say, reparations, to repair something that was past. What does it mean to repair something past? It isn't like picking up the hammer again that got broken and I need to put it together. Whatever repairing the past is, it means a reviewing of what took place, a looking again, a beginning to re-enter that stream that took place, which is now only virtual. It's real, but it's virtual. Where we are now, it's real and it's actual. But within this virtual space, by bringing things to light, there's a certain digestion that goes on. And in the process of it, it's this change of the past that I was mentioning before that has this new virtuality. It has a new power to be and perhaps to influence my life in a new way.
I think in the collection, Glass Between Two Moons, we know each other well, and we know each other's history to some degree, as much as anyone else's experience can be known, really, which is always a question. But there is this movement from what feels like, and it's not just sounds like, but feels like biography. And I get the reparation in there. And at the same time, you move from what seems to be, to at least to me who knows about you somewhat, you move very easily from that sense to a more universal, let's say, sense in terms of man, woman, father, mother, ancestors.
Well, I think in this way of viewing, perhaps bringing to light that which calls for light, of bringing to words that which is only whispered very faintly in the middle of the night. In that kind of movement in itself, there's a movement toward, I'm not sure that I would call it the universal so much as the objective. It's a movement that doesn't reject the personal history, the subjectivity, but is in search of a way of making it more transparent, more forgiving, less incriminating, less self-critical, less self-doubting. And in that movement, I think something like you describe takes place. It's my biography, my autobiography, but am I not, are you not every man or every woman that inner being, perhaps not yet fully developed, that inner being that is the living representation of humanity.
That reminds me of a phrase that you used about the responsibility of the poet. And I'd like you to really speak to that, but now I'm hearing you say this. It seems like that movement from personal to objective, as you say, is taking responsibility in that way, and I think it seems like a very demanding responsibility, actually. And I'd like to fit into that, along with responsibility, offering, and how that might fit in for you as well.
That's certainly a very full way to think of responsibility. More concretely, I find the poet's responsibility is really a responsiveness to this trace of whatever that wakens me enough, gives me enough energy to actually be on hand and take in this particular moment of my life. Having taken it in, then there is the further possibility of allowing it to grow, to develop in this manner of objectivity, so that anybody looking at it can begin to see relevant aspects of himself or herself.
Mm-hmm.
So responsibility, it's a kind of wakefulness, and poetry is really the creativity of wakefulness, at least in a classical view. Maybe that's what the Greeks would say.
What about the word evocation?
A vocation, you say?
Evocation.
Evocation.
We got the vocation part of it, poet.
It
Let's
is
put
a
it into
vocation
action.
and a vocation.
Yeah. Would you like to read another from that collection?
Yes. Maybe I'll read a couple. This is called the Tree of Yearning. And as an interjection, it might be prudent to say that much of poetry is about the writing of poetry, this deciphering of what is only indicated, hinted at, given a clue of, and somehow the work or the labor of the poet is to express, to put it into words. So the poet is always up against this most difficult and most holy medium, which we call language. This is called the Tree of Yearning. There's nothing holy on the island. Wrapped in mediocrity, it is moored midway in a shallow bay where ships run aground and are wrecked. That doesn't stop blessing after blessing to be tied to a tree beside paddocks of time. Its boughs watch sky flatten under glass, bones bleached by the sea, while others pray in the cauldron of misgivings, salt tears their remainder. It recollects the lap of seawater against a birch bark canoe as the first people came for mussels and berries. Then the intermittent wood ships with cows and roosters, the luff of sail, then the steel ferry, diesel staining its wake for the sake that no one will be exiled, even if in storm. The tree can't read words. The flame feels what they express in their seraph. Wrapped in a shawl of mist, it is a sadhu whose vigil practices austerities on earth as it is in heaven. The sentry post is slave to the fierce winds of island life. Scraps, paper, papyrus, parchment follow ebb tides outward to a sealed steel gray ocean. They scatter, dissolve, a fitful rain over skeletons of ships onto spillage that trails along the sea floor into its caves. As if words lost to saline still inflected dark thoughts of the drowned. As if signal fires lit by women anxious for hope would be seen these fathoms below. After a gale, the tree would receive a new host, flurry of the heart as fingers fasten to plea for God's favor, that the petition from someone washed of sin linger on behalf of souls who could no longer remember. Silhouetted at twilight, the tree huddles under bombardment of a million stars. The island wanders on a sea of many colors, like a dervish coat, like Joseph's. It has a patch for each suffering, each act of human neglect. The froth of waves lifted sunward is remnant. Remembrance laps gently against the hull is gone. It isn't caught on the net fishermen set for pollock, though the salt cod that Portuguese adventurers sought keeps the taste. When it is feast day and bells on the Anglican church call boats home, there is nothing to keep us there. Our cakes and barley soup will be hot, the rooster slaughter. Amid laughter, the tree receives its investiture, permitting others unaware of their own lack of feeling to voice compassion. The vineyard at harvest will not detain the rafts that carry us to visit the sepulchre. Shush, let us go.
These, just let me interject. I know you want to read another one, but these two that you've chosen are rife with sea and boats, I just and many other poems in this collection and others, follow that thread. It's a kind of an exciting and unpredictable, almost dangerous thread in some ways, and yet it's a thread that ties history together, at least, the world history in this world as we know it. I wanted to tie that into, mentioning that, well, when we first knew each other, you had a house on Cape Breton Island. that was not far from a very rugged seacoast. And in your collection, that's one of the 4 that you're mentioning as related. The one called Manon, you're writing about many weeks of holidays over the years that you spent in Grand Manon Island. And I guess the question here is, what draws you to rugged places, to rugged terrain, and how has that affected what is, obviously a very acute, practiced sense of observation of the natural world as well as persons in the natural world?
Yes, I think if I lived in the West, I would be very strongly attracted to the desert. There's something about being able to see the horizon unbroken that is compelling to me. And of course, looking out at the ocean or a bay, if it's big enough, gives that unbroken sense of the horizon. So it's such a fascinating thing, because one can look into the horizon and get lost in it and experience how the horizon opens, and in a certain moment one is on the other side looking back. It's also the solvency of water. The water dissolves everything. The mother solvent, the mother period, water, la mer. So yes, it brings me to a feeling of the sense of the scale of things, and that figures in what you pointed out in my poetic search for a way to view the perceptions and the impressions objectively, something that can be appreciated by anybody taking a look at that thing from that place at that time. Manon is an interesting work because how does one define a place? Well, there are people, and people are doing things, and they're the things themselves that have their symbolic value. They're the events that take place. It was a question for me in the collecting of the various pieces from Manon of how to express a place. Of course, one needs something of a storyline, so even though it's a very faint storyline through Manon, you have a sense of moving from a beginning where there's a little girl to the end where there's an old woman, and the various points between the relationships, the family, the occupations, the singular events that define a life.
Would you like to read?
Let me read just a couple of lead ones to give you a taste of.
I did want to interject something here that's curious to me, because we just had this conversation about the sea and the horizon, and in your wonderful book that's not publicly published, you write in exquisite detail about the tiniest formations of sand and rock. And it's curious to me how you connect your your observation, your attraction to that it sounds like an insulting word, minutia, but to that tininess and the calling of the horizon.
It's always that draw of infinity or something indeterminate, like the flower in the crannied wall, or the universe in a grain of sand. It's following that trace that can bring a certain receptivity to whatever it is, a grain of sand or the horizon, all the way on the other side. And that is what you were talking about with regard to responsibility. It's this taking in of what this time presents to one as the poet, allowing it to inscribe itself on some invisible membrane, and then attending to that inscription. This is all too literally said, but there is a reading, a taking in, and an impulse to express. I suppose that's the generosity, the other side of responsibility.
The offering side, yeah.
But here's the opening of Manon, called By Whale Cove. Brown leaves crispate on salt-stricken potato plants, now like dung-fired clay pots. August. A noon sun, short on patience and shadow, focuses on heat. Dust beneath is less soil and more reactive element, unready to comply. A girl watches from behind a tree. She watches a long time as the leaves wilt, desiccated. This is how you find feeling when the earth is let linger, when leaves fall dead. There's a complex, maybe a conflict throughout the collection between the earth and the sea. It is an island. The island is kept alive by the fishing industry, which is, as is taking place now, becoming unprofitable, and the fish have moved away. So you have a picture of the sea dying and the earth retreating.
I was thinking of this phrase, attention to detail, and connecting it to the responsibility of a poet. I remember Bobby Louise Hawkins once saying, if you're walking down the street and you see something in the shrubbery that calls your attention, and you keep on walking, you've made a mistake. Go back and look again. Allen Ginsberg saying, if you can show your mind as a mirror, then other people will be roused to see their own mind as well. And those two things fit very much for me into, what you're speaking about in a different way, but with similar intention, I think.
Would you like to hear how the woman ends? Do we have
Yes,
time?
that would be great.
In slumber, she slept in the barn loft. She kept gardens weeded, picking beans and squash. When gales ushered winter in, no one saw her until spring. All day a dog howled. She listened as she crouched among the rows, sharing the plant's anguish. After work, she found it in a well, nearly exhausted. She prayed for strength to pull the animal out. They became inseparable. The dog keeps guard while the woman works the soil. Before her eyes would fasten to the ground when people saw her. Now it is different. Her eyes are free to look where they like. The subject that winter was an abandoned house off a road to the old rock quarry. They said she was a phantom that haunted it. Children would go to bed with stories of what the ghost had done to deserve conspiring them to sleep. Spring would come without fanfare. Alder and willow wore a fuzzy look, then leafed out to compare themselves to spruce that knew no season. She was never seen alone. The dog, grown mangy, was a shadow that followed her shadow with its own. It never barked. The garden she'd tended went wild as if her distraction had granted a free pass to scions and dynasties of weeds. Boys and girls, grown tired of stories, threw rocks after their parties at the house. Window panes broken, sashes scarred by near misses, it appeared the figure of its reputation. This was before a storm when the tree fell on it. Afterward, certain of vacancy, pairs would wander off to an empty room. Naked bodies had no better idea than to hide. The house wasn't the real target. It was the woman, now her hair gray and thin. She isn't seen often. The dog has a visible limp and walks cautiously a few yards behind. So when it burns, it is finished. Ablaze, it is really roaring, gulping air like a beached whale. Perhaps a candle a boy had brought and lit to impress somebody he cared for. When the smoke clears, only sill logs remain, death making room for life. But loss of the house is too much. With no luggage, she waits at the ferry wharf, the blind dog in tow. Where the fire was, black matter fills a rectangle of scorched wood. Little help for meditating on the earth.
I'd like to bring up something that you said in our conversations, over the past few weeks. You said writing a poem brings a clarity, and that clarity is often discovered in the editing. And I thought it might be helpful to us writers to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, that clarity is the light that transforms something that was needing repair in the past, yet to be digested, and now it is held up so that its truth and its beauty might be expressed and appreciated by us humans. We need more of that.
Mm. One more little piece about writing. I've always known you to have a little spiral notebook in your pocket, and you probably have had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And I wanted to say that, and then to also ask you just what's the process of going from a spiral notebook into a 80-page collection, and so many collections like that. Are you going back to old spiral notebooks? Do you throw them out when you're done with them? Just a little prosaic entry into a writer's life.
Yes, I want to say first of all that I've gone to the bound notebooks now rather than spiral, because it was always too tempting to tear the pages out. It's quite something being in one's 8th decade. There's so many notebooks. You open a drawer and the notebooks fall out. There's a whole closet. The bottom of the closet is a sea of notebooks. What does one do with all of this material? It's a strong question for me. And I would like to add only that it was your invention of what we back in the 70s called the Time Chronicle that got me really going on these little notebooks. The Time Chronicle was that at some point, very arbitrarily taken, you would stop with your little spiral notebook, you'd have a watch, you'd write down the time, and you would write down what was happening, what you saw, or what you felt, what was going on.
Yeah.
Yes, we're all collectors of lapsed times.
Lapsed time chronicles. Yeah, yeah. Do you want to read one more, and we'll close with a poem?
I think I'm going to read The Linguist from this. I think we can fit it in, and so much of what we've been talking about has to do with language. The first word was one stolen, nomen. Its meaning was a guess, its sound wove a spell. It was not to assemble a dictionary that you began a list. It was the reason you couldn't have given then, reparations. There was a ventriloquism, another who spoke them in your voice. You would hear. Others followed. Kite silk, grisade, lamia. You kept them in a little moleskin notebook. Once by the lake, as you read aloud, you'd stare down the open mouth of a frog and felt sterile thunder in the abyss. Then you saw how a brightness tickles as though words were gasping, watching, dreaming. Hemlos, you felt deserted by your guardian spirit, your daemon. After that, single syllables were inconsolable. dab, yawl, schist. Each marked a leaves taking in whose wake you sank. A ballast shifting that had drowned the vessel. You would know the end before beginning. Glint, words jumped in ambush, the remorse of sense, an arrival of what was not invoked. They taught by surprise, like collateral damage, gratuitous pain. They taught nothing cannot be felt, nothing not freed from irrevocable dying. You wrote them on scraps, paper or not, on a dog tag worn around your neck, a talisman, mangle, palings. You feel they are living, like fire, their incandescence burns up all ungodliness. They gaze on you pleading, you acknowledge their call. Why, you ask? The dead don't know who they are. Day and night are impassable, unborn. They round in the wind's throat. The wolves howl. You listen, nothing. You look, a flash of black light on white. They have weight, gravity pulls. Gutturals are heavy, sibilants are mealy, ready to flit away. Labials rise and fall with the tide, floundering in the neap. Under the canopy of stars, according to lore, they decompose, become unborn faces, shells of snails, the luff and leech, to convey the tattered revenant home. Now the collection is lost. The words have decamped. What is left but mute happenings? Their silent cry of absence, their ill reason.
Great. Single syllables are inconsolable. I'm going to work on that one for a while.
Thank you.
A chant. We could make a chant. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Steve. Again soon.
Again soon.
And thank you, Betty.
Again, our guests tonight have been Steve Clorfeine and David Appelbaum. I hope you've enjoyed Words Carry Us for May. What is it? Oh, May 3rd, 5th, 6th. No, what is today?
9th.
I hope you've enjoyed Words Carry Us for May 9th, 2024. I am your host, Betty MacDonald. Greenkill, out.
David's collector of lapsed times is available for purchase.